Sound roll 14, what's that I hear? Bay City Ramblers. Camera roll number 28. Transcription is rolling, sound's rolling. Take 3 up. Sounds good.
Gosh, it's got speed.
Wait for it.
I'll go with you. 28, take 3.
Ramblers 3.
Okay, the question was what it was that the Ramblers did with the songs that they discovered on discs. From your vantage point, were you sort of recreating them note for note? Were you interpreting them?
A lot of people thought that we were imitating them and accused us of being imitators and duplicators of what was there. And how we used to say, I resemble that remark. But in retrospect, we couldn't, and we didn't really learn note for note off those records. We just got inspired by the sounds and were in awe of the genius of different ways people could put this music together. But in retrospect, we were very individual and really showed that we couldn't do it and that it probably couldn't be done. But I think to make the effort to try to learn the traditional way, we used to say that every other way has been tried. People would make it with electric bands or with drums or with classical guitars or with bel canto singing or operatic style. Every style had been tried except the traditional one.
There's so much to say on that subject. It's almost too much. The whole idea of putting down people because they want to emulate another sound is one that I find hard to understand. Because on the other hand, those people are the same people who are saying, well, you should play traditional music quite often. So, to me, there's a possibility of playing something exactly like you learned it from somebody that you really admire to wanting to change it completely. And we lie somewhere in between those. And I love that old-time music. Sometimes I like so much the feeling of playing like that, I'd like to do it. But quite often, I want to put things together differently, and I'll always sound different.
Yeah, for me, I think getting the spirit of it is important.
Yeah.
As much as anything.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it seems like you just about have to try to play every single note, sing every single note exactly the same until you find what that key is to that spirit. Other times, it's not quite so difficult to get there. And the vindication is when meeting people, some of the people that were on those records, or meeting some others who played in a similar style, and getting support from them, even if it was just a smile when they hear you sing or play. That's all you really need.
When I first heard Tommy Jarrell play, I said, my gosh, he sounds exactly like Ben Jarrell. Ben Jarrell was his father. And nobody was accusing him of slavishly imitating his dad. He just sounded like his dad. And I think that's wonderful that somebody, but after I began listening a little bit more, he didn't sound so much like Ben Jarrell. And I think that's one of the things that's involved here. When people think that we're imitating music, they just don't know the original very well.
The other thing that you used to deflect this argument a lot was the idea that, look, it was in classical music. They take Bach and they write it down, and now, hundreds of years later, you play it note for note the way Bach did. Why is that good?
Mm-hmm.
And what we do, questionable? I mean, it's an aesthetic issue in there, and that was one of the things that came along with our existence. We served as a critique of what the folk revival was doing, and we had supporters. This little magazine, the Little Sandy Review, a little mimeograph sheet from some guys in Minnesota. They wrote the most devastating criticisms of what the commercial market acts were doing, and they made the record companies quiver and quake because they wrote so incisively. And of course, they were our biggest fans.
If I understood your words correctly, you said you served as a critique of what the folk revival was doing. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
What did you mean by that? I'm not sure.
Well, I didn't exactly. I wasn't in total sympathy what was going on. So what we did was was what we wanted to do, and that served. It stood in defiance of the way things were going. Now, of course, at the same time, we were playing the civil rights movement was coming up, and that was exciting, and Bob Dylan was coming up, and Bob was an interesting case in point because he had some kind of absorption of and appreciation of all these things that we like. At the same time, he was reaching into that commercial world, but he was very unusual in that respect.
Ultimately, for me, I don't care if somebody wants to sound like somebody else as long as it works. And I guess that goes in with
the
what you're
feeling.
saying about the feeling.
Mm-hmm.
If the feeling is there and it works as music and as experience, that should be all that you need.
I think just the chance of meeting people like Tom Ashley at the festivals or Eck Robertson, even if there'd only been one of them, that would have been worth just a whole lifetime of struggling to get to that point. Just how these people approach their music was so much a good guide. I've had some of them say to me, "No, you don't want to play it exactly like somebody else. You want to play it your way." It gives it like an insight into how to go about doing it, and yet at the same time gives the guide of how not to sound like a parody of it too. It's pretty thin ice sometimes doing that.
Well, I think that we're using names that people may not understand. I mean, Eck Robertson was the man who made the very first country music record in 1922. And Tracy and myself in about 1960,
5 or 6.
earlier.
I think it's
maybe
63.
63.
Oh, yeah. Good
We
heavens.
drove all the way out across the plains of Texas to Amarillo and knocked on the door of this piano tuner looking for Eck Robertson. And there he was. He didn't know we were coming, but we had an incredible recording and talk conversation with him. And we would travel huge distances. I spent 8 weeks in eastern Kentucky trying to understand how the music worked there. Mike, you made lots of recordings and lots of field trips. So that these characters who we heard on the records became real, and we went to their territory. We didn't stay just in the city.
I want to return to that in a moment. Before I do, because I want to talk to some greater degree about your coming into contact with the artists whose records you listen to. Before we get on to that, there's one comment I want to throw back at you that somebody gave to me, and it was from Archie Green, who you all know, and he said that the Ramblers were, he called you, it was very complimentary, he said you were the Pied Pipers for several generations of college kids who listened to you come through town and form their own old-time string bands. And do you agree that did happen? Follow up, did you know it was happening at the time? Did you work with it and encourage it? Do you think you took on that role at some point? And did you cultivate it?
I don't know how much we cultivated that. I remember getting some photographs of people who posed like us and people who played music in a fashion after us, maybe. A few groups really stood out, and one of them still exists, the Uncle Willie's Brandy Snifters. To me, the real revitalization of string band music was taking place in the 70s, 80s, up to the present, because now there are thousands of people playing old-time string band music, making it part of their lives, just as the people who originally played it in the country used to. Although these people live in the city, they work as civil engineers or whatever. The music is safe for a while, and I certainly feel a feeling of that it was fortunate that we could be part of that revitalization, because it's an important music. It gives a lot of people joy. It's accessible. It has a lot of value.
But I think during the 60s, when colleges like Oberlin and Antioch University of Chicago, when they hired us, it wasn't to entertain them. It was to spread the word. I mean, some of those people would have looked forward to the party afterwards more than the concert, as a chance to, share music and play music and talk about details. We always did workshops. We never just did the stage show and got off. It was always interaction. And people don't understand that. We never stayed in hotels. We stayed on people's couches in their living rooms. And so that we had a network of college students and people who were interested at festivals and in cities all over the place. We had conversations that would go round and round year after year. It's totally different from the commercial world of folk music, which this film is supposedly about.
Oh, we did stay in motels sometimes, Motel 6.
In those days, it was $6. I remember after one
we
show in
traveled.
Boston. After one show in Boston, we spent, I'd say, 2 hours saying we're not going to pay more than $7 for a room, and we ended up about 50 miles away from Boston in a truck stop.
Those were the days when we traveled in a Volkswagen Bug, the three of us and our instruments too. So I mean, it did require us to do what we were doing in a way financially.
Let's talk a little bit about your own meetings with artists who you admired. Let me direct this specifically at this time, and I want to touch bases with each of you. Mike, you are preserved in some of the literature as the rediscoverer of Doc Boggs, or at least somebody who acted as his entree into the urban folk revival world. And whether that's true or not, I'd like you to talk a little bit about, maybe focusing on him specifically. What compelled you to want to meet Doc Boggs? How'd you go about finding him? And could you talk a little bit about that?
I was just going to ask you if you had enough, because it's going to be about 3 minutes.
Okay,
So.
then we'll start right there. I want to pull out a little of this as to what
Camera roll 20.
what made these two kids play
29 up.
want to meet. Oh, I'm sorry.
I think it'd probably
And
be
take
different
number-
for all three of us.
Yeah.
And take number 4.
Do you have, you rolling?
New Lost City Ramblers, take 4.
I have that.
Thank you. Sounds speed.
You got Barney.
Anytime speed.
Tracy has a tendency to look away rather than to look at you.
Tell Tracy.
Tracy, look at Michael.
I've wanted to
Even
kind
if
of
you're
interrupt
talking
you,
to.
Jonathan.
He was talking to
so we don't
me.
get
Yeah.
too much of a profile.
It doesn't look, it's pretty useless, I think, as a shot when he's looking to Mike, so.
Look over here a little bit. Even
Sounds
though,
good. His content is great.
Yeah.
Content.
Thank you.
And his name is Mike too, so.
All right.
Yeah, the trouble is speaking to the mic.
Speaking to the mic.
That mic, that mic, or that mic.
Well, I stand corrected.
Yeah.
Uh,
How we doing? Speed?
Now, there we go.
Okay.
Camera roll 29. Take 4.
Why don't you put that a little lower, Jordan? There. Okay.
29-4.
Okay, Mike, we were going to talk about your, what compelled you to go seek out and meet Doc Boggs and bring him to the rest of the world?
Interesting you say compelled. My parents had a recording of Doc Boggs. He was a coal miner down in southwestern Virginia, and he recorded almost by chance in 1927. And they had a copy of it, of this old recording that I loved as a child. And when we got the feeling that when I met some old-time musicians from down in southwestern Virginia, I would ask them, did you ever know Doc Boggs? Did you hear of him? So we asked, when we got going, the Ramblers, we began asking people about some of the older recording artists. One of them was Doc Boggs. And finally, when we were in Antioch in 1962 or so, I think it was Guthrie Meade, wasn't it, who told us that he'd met a guy at Antioch who I think was a janitor and a banjo picker, who had known Doc Boggs and gave us a place where he used to work in the coal country of southeastern Kentucky. So in '63, on the way back from a New Lost City Ramblers tour on the West Coast, my wife and 3 children, including one about two months old, went up on the dirt roads up into Mayking, Kentucky, and started trying to find him. And they led us to Neon, Kentucky, where I met a couple of guys on the street who said they knew Doc Boggs and loved his way of playing because he played the melody while he sang. I mean, we engaged in a conversation, a folkloristic conversation. And eventually I followed it over to Norton, Virginia, the trail, that is. And it was dark, too late to go to the post office to find him, so looked him up in the phone directory. And there was Doc Boggs, not his given name, his nickname. Went and visited him, and he played a little bit more for me, but he was very suspicious because people were going around and collecting folk songs and copyrighting them. And I suggested a couple of folk festivals, that they could have Doc Boggs come. And within 3 weeks, he was at his first folk festival. Then he went to Newport. It was the music which did it. His music was wonderful, very original, and he was an intriguing, very thoughtful person, and also a person who had a great chasm between his old wild drinking days and a certain kind of the idea of living a straight life. So we got to know one another very well and traveled a lot. But it was the music and the strength of his personality.
Anyone else want to tell a story of
Well,
experience?
yeah, in a strange way, the New Orleans City Ramblers gave me permission to do some things that I wouldn't have done otherwise. We made our first record, and then I started looking for material for our next record. I was intrigued with the old tapes that we had pouring in, that we had collections of, and I noticed lots of songs about the Depression of the 1930s. And I said, I was born then, but I don't remember a thing about it, so I want to experience that if I could, as research for New Orleans City Ramblers record. So I went down to eastern Kentucky by bus, bought a broke-down car that kept breaking down, kept getting the names of banjo pickers in eastern Kentucky from gasoline attendants who were, gas station guys who were working on the car, and built up a whole bunch of names of people to visit and photograph and record. And finally, one Sunday, my list was used up. I didn't know what to do. I said, I think I'll just turn left on the next dirt road that looks interesting, not knowing anything where it would lead. And I came into a little lumber camp there. Any banjo pickers here? Oh, and Oderby's in that house. I went to Oderby's house. What are you doing here? I saw you playing at the bar the other night. I'd been visiting at a bar where he was playing music. And they said, oh, there comes Rossi Holcomb. Hey, Rossi, come here. This guy walked in, and this man opened up his voice and sang, and it's what I've been searching for. I mean, it's just a big, high, lonesome sound that just joined bluegrass and old-time music and blues and gospel. It all crashed together in this man's voice. And then I spent a lot of time learning from him and eventually persuading people in the city to listen to him. I put out records, brought him to festivals, and it's strange to say this. I'm not looking for credit, but it's strange to say that he wouldn't have been heard. He wouldn't have been known, except I went seeking him, even though I didn't know who he was. Actually, he was the first one who gave me any clue of Doc Boggs. He said that he played some of Doc Boggs' songs, and he said, he lives somewhere around here over the mountains. And we shared that information. That was long before Gus Mead came in the picture even.
Well, we didn't know where he was, though. It's intriguing how random these things seem to be, but in a way, it seemed that wherever I went in those days, old-time music was around somewhere.
Well, I had the pleasure of meeting several fiddlers who would really fascinated me because of their records, and I think probably Eck Robertson would be the best example of that. But there was a fiddler that I met at a fiddle contest not too far from where I was living in Pennsylvania, and I don't know if he ever recorded, but it's just somehow playing music with him gave me a feeling for probably what was very typical of playing fiddles anywhere. And then because of the festivals, I met Dewey Balfa from Louisiana, and we always used to bump into each other at festivals, and always used to go to the same parties after the concert. And One time in particular, we were playing at a very lively dance after hours thing at the Newport Festival, and it was just a great night. Just several of us playing from different groups, and the Teatro Campesino from out here somewhere they were out there dancing, and the Cajuns' wives were out there dancing, and it was just a magic evening. And we're playing along, and I'm sort of trying to learn by playing the fiddle, and Dewey says, "Take the next ride." So, well, I'll see what I can do. And as I was working my way through it, I was just hoping and praying that I could stay in the right chord. The right notes, well, maybe some other day, but just the right chords. And I got finished, and he turned to me and he said, "You've got to come to Louisiana. You play that French music so well." So, as history will show, I recorded with him two, three, 4 times. My son did. My son did an apprenticeship with him. We just kept company quite a lot, and I learned a lot about what the difference is from the outside and what the difference is from the inside.
I think it should be said that when we started, bluegrass music wasn't that well known. When we started, Cajun music was virtually unknown. By unknown, I mean within the urban and college scene. And there was no attitude on world music. It was just foreign music. It wasn't actual stuff. And during our lives as musicians, this whole thing has come about and changed. I don't say that we caused it to happen, but we were busy opening doors and giving permission to other people to open doors. I remember a wonderful Irish singer, a guy named Paul Brady, who also does rock and roll. He told me that how important the early Ramblers records were to him in Ireland, not because he liked the music, well, I think he did like the music, but that he said it gave him permission as a city person to listen to the country traditions from his own country, and that it was okay to play that music. That gave him the opening, and I felt so good about that it wasn't just the tunes that we were playing, it wasn't just the old-time music or the banjo styles or the fiddle styles, it was the philosophy, the attitude. And that's been, for me, a very rewarding part of the whole thing, because most of the musicians who play now, I think, are so much better than we are as musicians.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the formal devices that were created to try and bring some of the old-time music that you folks championed to newer audiences. One I know is the Friends of Old Time Music, which John, you were involved with some others. Why don't you talk a little bit about, give a little intro as to what that was?
We had an organization in New York in the early 60s called the Friends of Old Time Music. Its purpose was to bring traditional musicians from the country to the city so city audiences could hear them, not as second acts to somebody else, but as a featured concert of someone who was important. The history behind it was that in the early Ramblers concerts, the New Orleans City Ramblers concerts, we would invite members of the audience to come up and play with us at the end of every concert. And some of them were pretty well known. And then eventually we started bringing people like Liva Cotton. I remember distinctly in December of 1960, I think it was, or 61, she played a concert with us. From the idea and the reception that she got, we said, we can do more of this. So we invited Roscoe Holcomb from Eastern Kentucky. The Greenbrier Boys, Gene Ritchie, and ourselves were serving as the introducers of Roscoe Holcomb, who was featured. And that was what started the Friends of Old Time Music. Ralph Rinsler, who's at the Smithsonian now, and Israel Young at the Folklore Center. It was the three of us who did this organizing. The second concert we had was a guy named Clarence Ashley, who we knew of from old records. Ralph had met him down south. He brought up a little backup band. The guitar player was a blind guy. That was the first time any of us had seen Doc Watson, who became a major figure. The first concerts of Bill Monroe in New York. The first concerts of the Stanley Brothers, of Doc Boggs, of Mississippi John Hurt, of Gus Cannon, of Joseph Spence, all these figures who are major figures now. They were presented by the Friends of Old Time Music, and we didn't have any money for advertising. We just take out we had a little mailing list. I'd make... Is that what you wanted?
Okay, that's the end of sound roll number 14, end of camera roll 29.